Something huge has just unfolded in Washington. The government shutdown has officially hit a breaking point. Federal employees, labor unions, and even major financial institutions are now openly urging Democrats to end this deadlock. Meanwhile, in New York, a once rising progressive star's campaign has imploded in a scandal that caught even his own allies off guard. Within hours, political momentum evaporated, supporters went silent, and voters started asking questions no one at the top of the Democratic Party seems prepared to answer. Pressure is coming from all sides, and the fallout is just beginning. Let's break down what happened, who's at the center of it, and what this could mean for the political landscape ahead. Our first stop, New York City. If you've been following the mayoral race there, you've probably heard the name Zohran Mamdani, a young progressive Democrat, part of that new wave of far-left candidates gaining traction in deep blue cities. For weeks, polls showed Mamdani with a seemingly unbeatable lead somewhere between 15 and 25 points ahead of his nearest rival. But then during a campaign stop, he shared a personal story about 9/11s, and that story would end up destroying his campaign. He spoke emotionally about his aunt, saying she stopped taking the subway after the attacks because she felt unsafe wearing her hijab. The message was clear. He wanted to highlight discrimination faced by Muslims after 9/11s. Within hours, fact-checkers and social media investigators dug in. They discovered Mamdani's only known aunt, Masuma Mamdani, was living in Tanzania during 9/11s. She wasn't in New York. She wasn't riding the subway. She wasn't even in the country. When pressed for answers, Mamdani tried to change his story. He claimed he was actually referring to his father's cousin, not his aunt, but that version fell apart too, because she also lived in Tanzania at the time. So here you have a candidate for mayor of America's biggest city, caught fabricating a story about one of the most painful days in modern history, and instead of apologizing, he doubled down, accusing his critics of Islamophobia. That tactic, turning a credibility scandal into a moral defense, might have worked years ago, but not now. People are tired of being told that asking questions makes them bad people, tired of politicians bending truth for emotion. So when Mamdani lashed out at those who caught him lying, the response wasn't sympathy, it was backlash, and it came fast. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo, now running as an independent in the same race, went after Mamdani during their debate and completely dismantled him. Cuomo didn't just question policy, he questioned character. He called out Mamdani for never having a real job outside politics, for doing little during his time in the state assembly, and for having one of the worst attendance records, even while voting to raise his own salary from around $110,000 to over $140,000. You've never managed anything, Cuomo said. You've never led through crisis. You've never done the work you claim to represent. Moments like that hit differently on live TV. They don't just damage the candidate, they expose cracks that were already forming underneath. Mamdani's downfall wasn't just about one lie. It was about what he symbolized, a movement within the Democratic Party that's increasingly detached from everyday voters. And that leads to what Cuomo called the quiet civil war inside the Democratic Party. On one side, you have the progressive socialist wing, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Mamdani, the activists who want to radically reshape the economy and culture. On the other, the establishment Democrats, the Schumers, Pelosi's, and Cuomos, who want to win elections, even if it means compromise. For a while, the two sides coexisted. The establishment tolerated progressives, assuming they'd energize younger voters, but could still be controlled. That illusion is breaking down fast. According to recent NBC polling, 2/3 of Democratic voters now view socialism positively. That's not fringe anymore. That's mainstream within the party. But only about 25% of independents share that view. And among Republicans, just 10 to 15%. So Democrats are being pulled left by their base, while the broader electorate stands still. The result? Internal chaos, and it's showing in the numbers. In New York, Mamdani's once massive lead, 20 points or more, has been cut in half. Among Hispanic voters, where he once dominated, Cuomo has caught up. Among independents, Cuomo is ahead. But this isn't just about New York, because while Mamdani was imploding there, Washington was facing its own explosion. The government shutdown. Here's what went down. Congress needed to pass a temporary funding bill to keep the government running. Republicans, who currently hold both chambers, introduced a clean continuing resolution, no controversial add-ons, just basic funding. Democrats refused. They insisted on attaching provisions for Medicaid expansion, ACA subsidies, and most divisively, new benefits for undocumented immigrants. The total cost of those additions? Between $1 and $2 trillion. Republicans seized the narrative immediately. Democrats are shutting down the government to fund illegal immigration. That message, fair or not, landed. Because then came the shocker. Major institutions that normally back Democrats started turning on them. The American Federation of Government Employees, representing nearly 800,000 federal workers, publicly demanded Democrats pass the Republican bill with no conditions. Then the American Bankers Association, America's credit unions, and Independent Community Bankers of America all released statements echoing that same demand. These aren't partisan groups. These are establishment power centers. And they were all suddenly siding against the Democrats. And then something even more telling happened. The mainstream media started shifting tone. CNN's Jake Tapper grilled Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury on live TV, asking why Democrats wouldn't just vote to reopen the government, so SNAP benefits, food stamps wouldn't be delayed. She tried to dodge, blame Republicans, deflect. But Tapper pressed hard. Moments like that used to be unthinkable just a year ago. When even friendly media starts asking uncomfortable questions, you know the political winds are changing. And the data proves it. CNN's own polling showed that during the shutdown, Republican approval ratings went up by 2 to 5 points. Democrats' numbers either stayed flat or fell. The generic congressional ballot, which asks voters which party they'd support if an election were held today, showed Democrats in their weakest position in nearly 20 years. At a time when the opposition party should be surging, they're losing ground. So how did that happen? The answer: strategy and narrative. Trump played this moment with surgical precision. He stayed largely out of the daily negotiations. No constant meetings with Schumer. No messy headlines. Instead, he let Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Leader John Thune handle it, keeping himself at a distance. It made him look like the calm one, not the cause of the chaos. And behind the scenes, he enforced absolute Republican unity. Not a single Republican broke ranks, not one. That's unheard of in modern politics. And he kept the message simple. Democrats are holding America hostage to fund people who aren't citizens. It's blunt. It's emotional. And politically, it worked. Every delayed paycheck, every angry federal worker, every business warning added fuel to that fire. Meanwhile, the shutdown allowed Trump's administration to quietly do something else. Reshape federal operations without congressional interference. His Office of Management and Budget, led by Russell Vought, the same man behind Project 2025, used the shutdown to freeze or cancel billions in spending, especially in blue states. They halted between $15 and $20 billion in infrastructure projects, citing violations of DEI-related contracting rules, and they permanently eliminated about 5,000 federal jobs, turning the shutdown into a realignment of government itself. For Trump, it was a win-win: political leverage and administrative reform. For Democrats, it was a lose-lose. The longer they held out, the more damage they took. And that's really what this moment reveals. Not just a tactical defeat, but a collapse in moral authority. For years, Democrats positioned themselves as the party of truth, science, and integrity. But when a leading progressive like Mamdani fabricates a 9/11 story, when leadership spins narratives that don't match reality, it chips away at that foundation, one lie at a time, one excuse at a time, until the public just stops believing anything they say. And once trust breaks, it doesn't come back. You can throw money, media, and energy at the problem, but if people no longer believe your words, you're done. That's what's happening now among working-class voters and independents. They're not seeing a party that represents truth anymore. They're seeing one that protects ideology, even when it conflicts with reality. Cuomo described it as a deeper shift, something beyond left versus right. He called it post-Americanism. It's the growing idea, especially on the progressive left, that America itself, its traditions, its founding, its institutions, is fundamentally unjust, that it must be rebuilt from scratch. And that's new, because for most of modern history, political debate happened within a shared framework. People disagreed, but still believed America was good at its core. Now, that shared foundation is cracking. The argument isn't liberal versus conservative anymore. It's American versus post-American. On one side, they're philosophical ones, and Democrats are struggling to hold that coalition together. Meanwhile, a new force is filling the gap: populism, and it's reshaping politics across the world. Populism isn't about left or right. It's about ordinary people reclaiming power from elites who failed them. And after decades of broken promises, the 2008 crash, endless wars, failed trade deals, public health debacles. People are done listening to experts who never pay the price for being wrong. That's why populism is winning, because it's right about one thing. The establishment stopped earning trust. We're seeing it everywhere. In Europe, and cultural guilt. Right-wing populism, Trump, Le Pen, Maloney, mixes economic protectionism with patriotism. One tells voters their country is broken beyond repair. The other tells them it's worth fighting for. Guess which message wins? Latin America, Asia populist movements are challenging the old order. But here's the key. Not all populism is the same. Left-wing populism, Bernie Sanders, Mamdani, AOC, focuses on wealth inequality, but gets tangled in identity politics. That's why right-leaning populism keeps beating left-leaning movements, even when both claim to fight the same establishment, because one side offers pride and belonging, while the other offers guilt and division. Look at the pattern. Republicans gained during the shutdown. Mamdani's numbers crashed in New York. This isn't about ads or consultants. It's about resonance. Who speaks to how people actually feel? For working-class Americans, cultural respect matters as much as economic security. They want to be heard, not lectured. And right now Democrats are failing to understand that. So what happens next? We're watching a realignment, unlike anything in generations. The old labels, Democrat, Republican, left, right, don't explain the split anymore. The real divide now is between those who trust the system and those who want to rebuild it, between those who see America's past as something to preserve, and those who see it as something to erase. And populism, especially the conservative, culturally rooted kind, is emerging as the dominant force in that new order. Democrats can still recover, but not if they keep ignoring reality. Not if they let the most ideological voices define them. Not if they keep treating voters like obstacles instead of people. The shutdown will end. It has to. Mamdani might still win, but barely. And even if he does, it won't be a victory. It'll be because these aren't isolated failures. They're signs of a system under strain. Cracks are spreading everywhere. And just like a rocket under too much pressure, something eventually has to give. The only question is, will this be a controlled correction or a full collapse? Will it make the system stronger or bring it crashing down? That depends on us, on whether we keep questioning, keep thinking critically. Because the establishment won't fix itself, it never does. Real change happens when ordinary people decide they've had enough and take back control. That's what populism really means. Not chaos, but accountability. Not rage, but renewal. If you've watched this far, it means you're paying attention, and that puts you ahead of the curve. So like this video, if you still believe truth matters. Subscribe if you want to be part of a community that questions everything. And tell me in the comments, is this the collapse of the old system, or the birth of something new? Because one thing's certain, America's next chapter is being written right now. The rocket is under maximum stress. The boosters are separating, and we're either about to reach orbit, or come crashing back to Earth. Either way, it's going to be unbelievable. But here's the thing. What's coming next won't just reshape one election, or one party. It's going to redefine what power looks like in America. Because behind every headline, the shutdown, the scandals, the collapsing campaigns, something deeper is happening. A silent reset of the political order. The institutions that used to guide this country, the media, the bureaucracy, even Wall Street, are starting to lose control over the narrative. For the first time in decades, voters, not corporations, are deciding what matters. And the people running the old system, they can feel it slipping away. Across every level, city councils, state legislatures, even school boards, you can see the same pattern. Outsiders rising, insiders panicking, and when the people who built the system start fearing the people inside it, that's when history starts to turn. The next few months are going to test everything, not just policies or politicians, but trust itself. Trust in government, in elections, in the media, and in the very idea that truth can still unite a nation. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. When trust collapses, chaos fills the gap. And that chaos, it doesn't care if you're liberal or conservative. It swallows both. What happens next will depend on who steps up and who steps back. Will Americans reclaim their institutions or abandon them? Will leaders rebuild the bridge between truth and politics? Power is realigning. Voices once ignored are rising. And those who mocked the storm now realize the storm is here. So stay tuned, because this isn't the end of the story. It's the opening chapter of something far bigger, and it's unfolding right in front of us.